So when you had those years of destruction, where you lost your crops, you had to figure out how to farm without spending money.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning you didn't have the money for fertilizer, you didn't have the money for
Mm-hmm.
pesticides and fungicides and herbicides. How did you? There was a fellow, if my memory's right, there was a fellow in South America that you reached out to?
Actually, how I started, I was like, okay, Baker's not going to loan me money anymore. So what I did, I started going to the library. I read Thomas Jefferson's journals because I thought, okay, they didn't have these synthetics back then.
Mm-hmm.
If he could do it. And I remember reading his journals, and he said, well, we were planting clover.
Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
We were planting clover and hairy vetch and turnips. And I'll never forget, I went to the local co-op, and I asked to buy 50 pounds of turnip seed. Well, they were trying to figure out how many those little packets that is, you know. Nobody had ever ordered 50 pounds of turnip seed, you know, and that got me started. And then at the same time, what was going on, Jay Fear, who was district conservationist with NRCS there,
Very cool guy.
he took an interest in what I was doing, asked me if I'd run for a seat on the Burleigh County Soil Conservation Board, and we struck up a friendship. And one thing about Jay is, like me, we have a passion for learning. Jay introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Ademir Caligari, and he was from Brazil. And I will never forget how Jay and I were sitting there listening to him, and he's worked in, at that time, he had worked in over 60 countries all over the world, getting farmers to implement cover crops. And I'll never forget Ademir saying, cover crops need to be seeded in multi-species combinations. And I'll never forget, I was sitting ahead of Jay across the aisle, and I turned and looked at him, and he just looked at me, nodded his head. And that next summer, I started growing multi-species covers, and rest is history.